Greek guests coming for the Holy Week.
I think the Greeks still have a little bit of time before they're holding.
You're right, because they have their their 2 weeks after you.
Yeah, they're 2 weeks behind us.
They are 2 weeks behind you.
They use the Julian calendar.
Yes. But in the Julian calendar, this is now holy time.
Yeah, still they're in Lent like we are.
Okay.
I've only seen this one.
You'll have a better angle from here. These are Greek dignitaries coming for الكنيسة كلا. So in this proper time, we are now approaching the Greek monastery. Kanis. Kalla. These are Greek monks, and the church is connected to Greece, and it could happen that probably in this car Monsignor Theophilis voilà. Théophilis, c'est mon pote, Théophilis. Théophilis, shalom. He used to be the guide, and he's coming. He is the Archbishop of Jerusalem. Shalom lecha. He is the Archbishop of Jerusalem. You can come. He was the guide.
الله يعطيك يا ابو كان
سبيطار. So here is the Archbishop of Jerusalem coming here. Are there? Coming to visit the place. Theophilis. Ma shlomcha?
How are you?
Long time. I'm so pleased to see you.
Where are you?
I'm in Jerusalem always. You became a famous person. We knew to travel long years ago together. And please, I will come to visit you to your place.
Yes. Now where are you?
I'm Jerusalem, always guiding the VIPs guests coming.
Very nice. You're welcome.
Tekanis?
Your name for
Gil.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you finished with the glasses. هلا معك. أنا مش مقدر. إيه يمين من زمان. طب السدر. كذا. حق شلاتين.
شلعت اسمعوه
كان. شل يونان. حق بشيل هذا.
زي اتخيل ابو حول الشام.
لا ده. هدول معك لا. حبيبي.
اهلا
وسهلا. Oh, let's go upstairs. لا نيفو من المالا. So we're gonna have some short break. This is the Independence Day of Greece right now, and as you can see, Archbishop Theophilis came to bless the Greek Consul of Jerusalem, and here in this location they will hold a blessing ceremony, which is leading to the church. So I give you some break right now. We are now going to have a 15-minute break, and I'll meet you in 15 minutes. Have a good cup of coffee, do what you have to do. Oh, Ishai, it's a pleasure meeting you here. We had a short break after this beautiful visit in Mount Zion, and we would like to visit your place, the place you are
Thank you.
taking care of, which is the Chamber of the Holocaust.
Right, so we're still on Mount Zion, yeah?
Yeah, we will
you.
follow you now.
Yes. All right, so here, welcome to the Chamber of the Holocaust on Mount Zion. And this is actually the first Holocaust memorial to have been founded anywhere in the world. This Holocaust memorial was founded in 1949, right after the State of Israel was born. And they put it here on Mount Zion because actually back then, most of the old city of Jerusalem was not in Israeli hands. So here Mount Zion was the closest spot that they could find to the old city, to the western wall and the site of the temples. And actually from the roof of this building right here, this was perhaps the best vantage point from which people could actually see the western wall. They couldn't go there yet, but they could see it from up there. So they established a Holocaust memorial in the closest possible place to the holiest place in Judaism, the western wall in Jerusalem. So let's come take a peek inside. And so if you take a look right here, this statue here is actually a very good example of the kind of artifacts that we have in this museum. What we have here is not necessarily things of great historical significance, but these are things that were of great personal significance, personal emotional significance to certain survivors. They came over here to bring certain things in order to tell their stories, things that they wanted to say about their experiences in the Holocaust. This is obviously a statue of a little girl, and her name is Stella. And the woman who this little girl became commissioned this statue right over here, and you see she has her little suitcase and her teddy bear. And this is significant because she wanted to tell the story of how she was saved in the Holocaust. That is, that when she was in the ghettos when her and her family were being rounded up to be taken to the trains to go to the death camps, and they were standing there in line, Stella remembered that she had forgotten her teddy bear back in the apartment. And so she was very attached to her teddy bear, so she ran back to get her teddy bear. And by the time she got back, they had left already, and so she remained in the ghetto. And if she had gone on that train, she would not have survived. She remained in the ghetto and she ended up surviving. So she had that commissioned over here to tell her story. And actually, that is a very, very good example of the kind of thing that we have over here. Really, the museum/memorial, it was started as more of a memorial place. In 1949 and in the 50s, Holocaust survivors did not necessarily have a forum in which to talk about what had happened to them. In fact, very many of them did not necessarily want to talk about what happened to them. They weren't ready yet. But also, unfortunately, the general society here in Israel was not very receptive to the idea of talking about the Holocaust. Everyone was, in a kind of a euphoria, justifiable euphoria over the establishment of the state, and this sort of talk about the great tragedy of the Jews in Europe, in the diaspora, was not really on the cards So they established this place over here, and the state was also involved in establishing a memorial. In fact, they started it by bringing a bunch of canisters of ashes from the crematoria in some of the death camps in Europe. Ashes that, were the burned bodies of Jews. And they flew them over here to Israel, and they had a big state funeral going from the great synagogue in Tel Aviv down here to Mount Zion, and they buried the ashes. They buried the ashes down inside the museum. Over there, you'll be able to see where they're buried. And they established a sort of a symbolic cemetery. And a symbolic cemetery where people who had survived that tragedy could come and meet and talk among themselves and say things that they knew that only other people who had gone through what they'd gone through would understand. And they would learn Torah, and they would say prayers for the souls of the deceased. And then over time, they brought things in to try to tell certain stories and to try to kind of convey the main messages that they wanted to say to the world based on their experiences. All right, so we will continue down here, take a little look inside the actual museum. And as you see, going down the stairs, this is really the basement of an extremely old Ottoman Empire time building. So here we have the entrance room of the museum, and you have one display case with a bunch of different objects in it. You have a sign in the background talking about, say, a history of hatred. And really what this display is about is anti-Semitism throughout all these different times in Europe and all the different countries. And what we're trying to convey over here is that the problem, the great hatred, that great evil that these Holocaust survivors, that all the people who died in the Holocaust encountered, was not really about, a people. It was not about the Germans. It's simply about an idea. It is about a kind of hatred that really was everywhere. You have here books, little books, simply anti-Semitic tracts from Poland, from the Czech Republic, from France. Here is a book that says Le Juif Errant, which means the wandering Jew, and the anti-Semitic trope about how Jews never contribute anywhere and they're always wandering around. And obviously some simple Nazi paraphernalia. Here you have a nutcracker with anti-Semitic carvings on it. You see here, a Jew picking his nose, and with a whole bag of money where the money is falling out. Also the anti-Semitic idea that Jews have all the money somehow and are controlling the world for their own ends. And then all of these things, but perhaps here on top is maybe the most striking example of this issue. Here we have, obviously you see the picture of Adolf Hitler. This is a copy of his book, an original copy, Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, translated into English and printed. If you can see there, the little eagle, that's the Nazi symbol, and right next to under it says 1939. Printed in England in 1939. See here at the bottom, publishers, Worsted and Blackett Limited Publishers, London. And so you can see that in 1939 there were enough people in England who were interested in reading Mein Kampf that they had a printing of it and a publishing. So it wasn't just in Germany. It's not just any one group of people. It was a movement. It is a thought. And obviously, throughout all the generations, here is simply obviously, people who had been in the camps brought some swastika armbands and so on. And this really this opening display is to establish just a context. And the survivors, we want people to not forget the danger of anti-Semitism and how ubiquitous it can become. Okay. Right, so if we go onwards here, be able to zoom in a little bit onto the first main room over here. So, in this room, you won't be able to see exactly and necessarily what I'm talking about. Well, first of all, we have, just this huge, amazing painting, artwork also, painted by a survivor, in which kind of, this is an abstract impressionist artwork in which he is kind of on the bottom. There is the red, the blood, he says the sea of destruction. There are all sorts of images that are difficult to see. And he's trying to kind of paint with art the symbol of the souls of the Jews ascending into heaven. And and you see on the top, the heavenly, right to the heavenly part. And so that's just it's just a piece of artwork. Over here, you have a bookcase. And it just simply looks like a bookcase, but it's very significant. These are only a few of these types of books that we have in the museum. And if you can see a little bit on the side, there are these tombstones. Right? And the truth is that this room is filled with tombstones, and actually we'll see later in the courtyard that the whole museum is filled with these tombstones. So remember, I talked about how they had buried ashes here. So they had kind of a symbolic grave for all the people who didn't have proper Jewish graves in the Jewish cemetery. And then after there was that grave, survivors who had lived in certain towns and certain communities in Europe and wanted to have some sort of memorial for their town, the life that they had that was just utterly destroyed. So we get together, and there are many of these organizations of people who used to live in X town or Y city, in the community where there was a Jewish community in Europe, and they got together and they dedicated a tombstone to their town. And they wrote a little something about where the town was, and how many people were there, about what the date was when they were deported, something like that, just so to have a memorial for this whole life, this whole civilization that was lost, and they want to not be forgotten. They want the legacy to remain. And the next stage was books. Each one of these books is a memorial book with the history of a town. They got together, they gathered together names, all sorts of things like that. Simple history about the town, the rabbis in the town, stories about how life was in the town, the kind of people there were in the town, all the different political movements they had in the town. Simple Jewish life. And they wanted it to be remembered. And one last thing. Here I can show you one of these on camera. So many people were exterminated. And they didn't know when they died or where they died or where their remains were. And their names could have been lost. So people, again, from these towns, they gathered together all the names they possibly could of people who they knew from their town who were killed. And they wrote them on a scroll here. This is a scroll of parchment. This is the traditional Jewish way of writing down our Holy Scripture. And they simply wrote, you see, names upon names upon names upon names upon names. Each one of these scrolls, we have many of them. One town, simply one town, people, all people with their own hopes and dreams, who lived in pre-war Europe and were killed simply for the fact that they were Jewish. So that is one aspect of what this museum is for. It was a place in which the survivors could come and try to express their love for the life that they had before the war, and to try for it not to be forgotten, and so that the name of their towns, their community will not be forgotten. Here we have even a really very, very simple display case. Simply religious artifacts from towns from before the war. There's nothing to do necessarily with the Holocaust. They just simply survived through the Holocaust. Prayer books, Torahs, phylacteries, and actually there's one object here that is perhaps of more interest and poignance in pointing out what the message is, and that is that there is here this big leather-bound book, and the truth is we have only the cover, and what it says on it is, this is a book of the Society for Visiting the Sick. They had an organization, the people got together, whenever there was someone who was sick in the town, this organization would go and visit that person and try to cheer them up. Visiting the sick is a big part of the Jewish social practice. And it says, but the town where it's from, it says it's a town called Ashpetzin. And Ashpetzin was the Yiddish name for the town, which in Polish is called Auschwitzim, and which the Germans in turn called Auschwitz. And that was, of course, the town near which the Germans established the most infamous and the largest death camp. It's really a network of work camps, concentration camps, and obviously the extermination camp. And the point was that here you see that even in that town, before all of these horrific things happened, in that town there was a small Jewish community that had a vibrant life where they simply went about living their lives and trying to do good and visiting the sick. And this monstrosity, this monstrous crime of putting the worst thing that humans had ever come up with near their town, they wanted to say, you know, before that it was our town and it was good. And you know, so that the life that was around, the life that abounded in Eastern Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, also in Western Europe, before the war, will not be forgotten. So here we'll go toward. So over here, this is actually a larger room in the museum, and again you see on the walls all throughout the background these tombstones. There are around 1,300 tombstones in this museum for towns, all of them dedicated from survivors who had lived in that town. So you see that this movement in the 50s and in the 60s really of dedicating a tombstone for your town it just exploded. It became very widespread. We have tombstones here from towns from Poland, where perhaps there was the highest Jewish population before the war. From Hungary, personally where my family was from. Yugoslavia, Greece, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and even Germany. And some of the other European countries, really everywhere, because this idea resonated with everyone to try to simply make their legacy continue. So that's the background. That's what's around the wall. But over here, really, in this room, there are two sections. The first section, which you can see part of over here and over here. The first section, perhaps over here, you have something which you can see would illustrate this. We call this really the destruction section. And this is a section where the artifacts in the museum tell the story of the death and destruction that was brought upon the Jews in the Holocaust. But there are really several unique aspects of this story that the survivors wanted to tell. So first of all, over here, you have a big Torah scroll. And perhaps you can't see it very well, but it is soaked with blood. And this is really something from one of many, many stories that happened in Eastern Europe in the beginning of the Holocaust, in the beginning of the German occupation really, before they had even decided on the final solution of exterminating all the Jews. In 1939, when the Germans conquered Poland within 1 month, the army moved on, and behind the army, the SS, the special police of the Nazi regime, designed to start the separation of the populations, which meant first and foremost the Jews. So the first thing they did is they made sure to tell the Jews that we are here and we are going to humiliate you and destroy you. And one of the main ways in which they did that is they took Jewish religious artifacts, like here, the Torah scroll, which the Jewish identity is so tied to, and desecrated them. But over here with this particular Torah scroll, there was more of a story. This is from a town called Węgrow in eastern Poland. And in Węgrow, it just so happens that the whole industry of that town was producing these Torah scrolls. And they would sell them, and that was their economy. They, obviously, you have to make the parchment from cow skin. So they would raise cows, they had farmers, and they would people who know how to do the ritual slaughter in order to make it fit for making the Torah scroll out of them. And, and the people who would write the Torah scrolls, the people who would process the leather, all of that was the industry of the town, and they were very, very proud of that. They would provide the Torah scrolls for all the surrounding towns, and it would, and it was a good business. So in this town, when the SS first showed up, they took this Torah scroll out of the synagogue and brought it out into Times Square, and they shot a bunch of people onto it. So it was soaked with blood, and that was the Germans' way of attacking the very identity, the very humanity of the Jews over there. And here, on the other side, You might be able to see another part. 1 second. No, you can't see me? Okay, so we'll see simply, there are examples of what is, something that is really famous actually. The uniforms that they had to wear in the concentration camps and in the death camps. And actually in one of them, next to them, there is a number. There was a tag with a number from a camp, from the work camp in Buchenwald. And that is significant because survivors who came here, and really survivors from all around the world, would often talk about what that experience was like when anyone, not just the Jews, but when anyone would arrive at one of these Nazi concentration camps, their clothes were taken away from them, all their belongings were taken away from them, they were off, their heads were shaven, so they all looked kind of the same, and they were given a number. In Auschwitz, they tattooed the numbers on their arms, but really everywhere, they no longer had a name, they were given a number. And this was very much a directed process. What the Nazis were trying to do was to completely dehumanize the person, to take away their sense of humanity, their sense of identity, their sense of pride, and by conveying to them, you are not a person, you are nothing, you are simply a number, and you are our prisoner. And that way, very many of the people who went through this were in fright, would give up. And it's been written by many, in many a Holocaust memoir, that all the people who didn't find some way to maintain their identity, who gave up, did not survive. And that was really, and the Nazis knew that this is how it would work. There was Viktor Frankl, who wrote a famous book called Man's Search for Meaning. He had gone through the Holocaust, and his experience taught him, and he's a psychologist, his experience taught him that if man does not have some sense of meaning, some sense of identity, he cannot survive. So that is portrayed by the uniforms and by the way that the Germans simply desecrated the Jewish identity. Another part of it is also, of course, to show how the Nazi ethos, the Nazi ideology, they considered to be so diametrically opposed to the Jewish ideology, and we wholeheartedly agree. But they were trying to crush it. What the survivors here and they were trying to say is that the Torah, the Jewish way of life, in a lot of ways, to Hitler came to symbolize ideas of simple, basic morality, such as helping the poor and helping the weak. And in Hitler's worldview, in his Nazi ideology, he emphasized the Übermensch, the great, the strong, the powerful, and then he said there were the Untermenschen, the subhumans, of which the Jews were the greatest. And he said that the stronger should always try to dominate the weaker, and he simply wanted, of course, to do away with people who he considered Untermenschen. So his fight was not just against the Jews themselves, but against their ideology. So that's one aspect. But here in this room, closer, on this part, we actually have the opposite, right? The resistance to this exact thing. And here perhaps is the most characteristic part of the museum. Because here in this section, we have a bunch of different things that survivors brought and told stories about how these were the things that they did in order to fight back psychologically, in order to maintain their sanity, their humanity, their sense of identity in the concentration camps. Perhaps over here is the most striking story about that. This actually became a famous story. So in here, you can simply see, they are what look like a bunch of little brown kind of cups. And this is actually a replica of the original, but the woman who commissioned this replica had been where the original story happened, and she was instrumental in it. And she told the following story. She said how one winter in Auschwitz, the time of year was such that the Jewish festival of Hanukkah was coming up. Now, on the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, the Jews traditionally light little oil candles in order to commemorate a victory from 2,300 years ago. A victory here in the land of Israel against the oppression of the Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, who at the time were trying to squash the Jewish religion and to not allow the Jews to practice their religion, and the Jews rebelled and managed to cast off the yoke of the Greeks And so that victory of our ability to practice our religion against depression, we've lit candles for 8 nights. And on the festival of Hanukkah. Now, of course, in Auschwitz, they did not at all have the freedom to be able to do this. So they had to but they really, really wanted to light the candles. So they had to devise a plan. They had to find a secret place, and they had to, of course, gather materials. So they didn't have candles or anything. So what they did is they snuck out some potato peels from the kitchens. Some of the people in the camp, women really, who worked in the kitchens, they smuggled out some potato peels, and they saved a little bit of margarine. They needed something to light. They needed some fuel. Every day they were given a small little bit of margarine, and a lot of people got together, and for a few weeks before, they saved a very tiny bit of that margarine, and which is an amazing thing considering the fact that they were all on the verge of starvation. And they gathered enough margarine to be able to fill 8 candles. So on the 8th night of Hanukkah, which is the night that we light 8 candles, they gathered together as many people as they could without attracting too much attention. They found a secret place where they would not be caught, and they had a rabbi there, and he came and he lit the Hanukkah candles. And another part of the story goes that the rabbi was going to say the blessing, one of the blessings, which really is, it says, Shechianu v'kiyamanu v'gyanu lezman hazeh, which means, they say, I thank God that He has brought me to this time, He's given me life and sustenance to get to this time in this place that I may light the candles. And he paused, and he thought, and he paused for 5 minutes apparently before he said that blessing, and then he finally said the blessing. And everyone asked him, what happened? Why were you pausing? And so he said, I was thinking about the meaning of the blessing. I was thinking, how can I possibly say that I am thankful to God for having brought me to this place, to this, the most awful place that I could possibly have imagined, this hell on earth, here, this Auschwitz, where this is happening to us, where everyone around us is dying, and when our time will probably come soon, and we're starving. How can I say that? He says, but then I thought, and I dug deep, and I thought to myself, if even in this place, it can still be true that a bunch of people can get together to light the candles, and to put some light in the darkness, and to say, we still want to express our identities. We still want to express our personalities and our faith. He says, if that can happen even in this place, then truly I should be thankful for having seen that is so. And there are many such artifacts. Here, someone, right in front of me, there is a prayer book that someone wrote from memory on the backs of some German documents. Those were the only papers that he could find. It was in an airplane factory, in a camp where they were producing airplanes. And he wrote down the prayers from memory. Obviously, he didn't need to write it down because he remembered it by heart, but he did it so that other people may pray, so that they will be able to remember something of their identities, of their background, and just try to kind of fight back psychological resistance. There is also, there is a shofar, what we call a shofar is a ram's horn that the Jews, on our New Year, on Rosh Hashanah, we blow the ram's horn. Right, we blow the ram's horn, and they, on the last year of the war, a bunch of Hungarian Jews who were only brought to the concentration camps. The last year of the war, and the Jewish New Year and Rosh Hashanah, they blew that shofar. So all of these things, the main message is simply that the survivors really, really wanted to talk about that part of their experience. They wanted to talk about how, by fighting back against dehumanization, they managed to help themselves survive. And they wanted to tell the story of the indomitable human spirit and the Jewish spirit to fight through that. Right, so that's mainly this room. And if we come out here into the courtyard, obviously it is a bit dark, but here you kind of get some idea of what we're talking about with these tombstones. If you go and all around the walls, all around the walls here, these tombstones, Koznitz, and Diazov, and here I'll actually show you the tombstone from the town where my grandfather was from. The towns there are Marmarosh and Siget. These are actually two different towns, but they were right next to each other. My grandfather was from Siget, and he's no longer around, but he would tell stories about his town there. There are actually several famous people. Elie Wiesel is one of the most famous Holocaust survivors, was also from that town. The town in, what is now Romania. And, so people simply came and dedicated that. So for all of this, maybe if I summarize just a little bit, there's another part of the museum which is not able to show you, where, one little room where they have, the two main features of the room is there is a replica of the crematoria, the ovens that they had in the extermination camps, where they would burn all the bodies of all of the Jews that they were murdering, and all the people, all the other people too, that they were murdering in this kind of fashion. And they put a replica in there because that's another part of the experience of the Holocaust that they wanted to make sure that everyone remembered, which is that although there have been many atrocities around the world, and they continue to happen, many times a dictator or a people decide that they're gonna kill millions of people. Mao Zedong in China simply decided that he wanted to industrialize the country, so took away all of the means of the farmers to survive, and untold millions died from that. In Russia, Stalin would kill all of his political opponents, and again, they can only estimate how many millions of people died because of him. But all of those places, and of course those are all horrible, horrible things, but the Holocaust is unique in one way, and that is that it was not some sort of expedient situation. It wasn't just because some dictator was paranoid or because he wanted to make some policy change and he didn't care about all the people. Rather, this was a direct attempt to actually exterminate an entire people because of ideological reasons, in order to exterminate that whole people, and to the point where they made it a science. It was like a factory. There's someone who went to Auschwitz and said that this is a factory of death, because it was like an assembly line for murder. They perfected the way, and they thought about this a lot. They perfected this over years, how to murder as many people as possible in as short a time with as few resources, like it was a business. I wanted to say that this was an ideology of hatred. Right, yeah, ideology of hatred, and so that is perhaps the message. To summarize, one of the messages that they want to say is in a sentence that we should all remember the kind of hatred that can come from ideologies when ideologies disregard simple morality. But on the other hand, from the Jewish perspective, they wanted to show how there were Jewish people who were victims of this, who were able to maintain their identity and to maintain their spirit and to come through and to pull through and to come here to Israel and to rebuild an entire country, to rebuild completely from scratch. There was nothing. They had lost everything. But they did not decide to take revenge or to kind of mope around. They said, our mission in life is to rebuild, and so they came here to Mount Zion, and near in Jerusalem, in the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, and said, ultimately, this is the story of the Jewish spirit emerging triumphant through the darkness. All right. Thank you. Can't go out through there. Let's do it back on. Back on here. This building that you see here, where the chamber of the Holocaust is at the bottom, but in the top of it, and this was also important for the survivors to talk about. In fact, they made a staircase inside the chamber going up to here. This very simply is the entrance here. We won't try to disturb them, but I'll show you a little bit. Here. This is a yeshiva. This is a place, a Talmudical college for people, Jews, to study Torah, study the ancient heritage of the Jewish people. And this is, of course, something that's very, very important to Jewish identity. And they're trying to show that, even though Hitler and the Nazis were trying to destroy us and destroy this whole civilization, we come back here to our ancestral homeland, and there are people studying. Actually, right now, it is right before Passover, so the Talmudical College is off. They're on vacation, but there are always still some people studying, because the study of Torah is a very integral part of Jewish life, and there are people basically doing it 24/7. This here is called the Diaspora Yeshiva, Diaspora Talmudical College, because they also specialize in taking in students from around the world who want to come to Jerusalem and study some Judaism. Right.
The dark of Jerusalem night, beautiful evening, and we leave this chamber of the Holocaust where we had this magnificent visit. Very emotional, together with the Shai. Here is the place. If you come back, keep it in mind. And today's tour will end by the Zion Gate. Today, we will not enter the old city of Jerusalem. We can see the yeshiva boys having a break between their study right now. Little Nash, hi boys. There's a Talmud Torah up on Mount Zion, as you can see. So what did we have today? We had 2 churches, we had 2 mosques, we had 2 Jewish holy spots, a Christian graveyard, and right now a Talmud Torah. This is a place where youngsters coming from all over the Jewish world come and study. Some do it in Jerusalem, some do it in Hebron, some do it in the new city of Jerusalem. But after the Holocaust, keep in mind that we do deal with a very interesting, we do deal right now with a very interesting period where the yeshivas in the Holocaust were all destroyed. And this is a central mission for Israel to help the revival of this Jewish knowledge. So we leave this section of Mount Zion, the 10 Commandments, protecting us as a guideline for decent behavior. 7 commandments of Noah, 10 commandments for the Jews. If this would be respected, the whole world would look much better. What is fascinating here is to see this incredible energy. Do we have a question I would like you to keep in mind? That you can send your questions through our website and online. I will be pleased to answer. So Taylor, when is the peak time for tourists to visit these sites? We are lucky that things have been quiet as far as crowds go. You're right. As a matter of fact, these places are quite busy all year long, but we choose a very interesting slot at the end of the day, starting our tour at 4:00 p.m. today here in Jerusalem, due to this broadcast to the States, which start 10 o'clock at the East Coast, but it is 8 o'clock in the western part of the US. But the city is busy. I would not recommend you to come and visit the city during the peak time of August, Passover, or Sukkot, although this can be very interesting and beautiful emotions. But this will be really, really packed. We can see schools coming, and you can see that soldiers are guiding the pupils at schools. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, is providing guidance to needy population schools. And the global idea is that the more we can teach, the more one can learn about his heritage, the better, a better citizen he will be. And we can see a school here, don't know yet where they do come from, but this school is traveling in the streets of Jerusalem at night, trying to understand the history and benefit from the beautiful lights and atmospheres in the city. Or we can ask them where they come from. מאיפה הבית ספר, חברים? מאיפה אתם? נופית. נופית, very nice, יפה. So they come from a small community in the city. And we see another school. This seems to be a modern yeshiva. These are modern Orthodox kids, you can see, with a knitted yarmulke on their head. And we are literally heading towards the Zion Gate. The title of our day today was Mount Zion. And Zion Gate is the connection between Mount Zion and the old city of Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, the place we have been visiting together today, Mount Zion, was a part of Jerusalem city all over the history. But when the city was once again destroyed after Arab destroyed the Crusader Jerusalem, the Turkish Empire, named Ottoman Empire, rebuilt the walls of the city. And the Emperor Suleiman the Magnificent decided not to include Mount Zion within the new walls. This is very interesting. One area was not included. We can try to understand what was his position. Suleiman the Magnificent first carries a very interesting name, Suleiman, which is Solomon. He carries the name of the first builder of the temple, the son of King David we mentioned today, King Solomon. But Suleiman in Arabic means that the new ruler is a Muslim. And what we have seen today is probably mainly Jewish and Christian. And I may guess, but this is only an assumption, that Suleiman didn't want to emphasize on the Jewish and eventually the Christian character of Jerusalem. And he decided to skip this area by not including it in the walls. And the gate you can see here is called Zion Gate. If we come closer and zoom, we'll be able to watch at these bullet holes. These are from the 6 Days War. Up on top, the walls, the Jordanian elite troop named the Jordanian Royal Legion was watching from the walls towards Mount Zion. And from here started the first shots towards King David's grave, where the Jewish soldiers were protecting Jerusalem. And from here, this is one of the two spots where the war, the 6 Days War, started from. The state of Israel, it is hard to say if we were really intention that war or prepared to the war, but the state of Israel didn't want to jeopardize the existence of holy sites belonging to Christian, Jewish and Muslim, and we decided not to use neither tanks nor artillery in the old city of Jerusalem combat. And this is why only man-to-man infantry soldiers fought here in the city of Jerusalem. We lost here, my friend, 183 men during the war of Jerusalem. You remember the atmosphere, the victory. But here in Jerusalem, we still cry and mourn these 183 men who gave their life for the freedom and the reunification of Jerusalem. So for all of you watching us from East Coast to West Coast, and probably from Australia, New Zealand, and any other English-speaking area, of course, sorry for the British UK, we thank you for having joining us in the last 3 hours for this beautiful tour of Mount Zion. And Alan,
Gil, and I want to thank you for really joining us and being and imparting so much of your knowledge to our viewers.
it has
Thank
been
you very-
a real pleasure to share with you, and you will be the one telling us when is the next broadcast serial.
That's
It's a
right.
big pleasure. So we wish all of you a happy Passover, kosher and happy Passover, the way we say in Jerusalem, and we look forward to walking with you in the city of Jerusalem and all over Israel in the coming month. Shalom.
Chag Sameach.